let's hear from our panelists today. I'm very happy to welcome our panelists, Dr. Mahesh Patankar from MPN Systems, Nandan from Schneider Electric, Sunil Sharma from BYPL, and Shweta Kulkarni from Prayas Energy Group. All of you are welcome to the dais, and let's start. And yeah, I'm sorry, Anurag Dhyani from RE Connect Energy, my bad. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. And I think we have the right stage set up. Whenever we talk about changes, a change goes through broadly 3 steps. It starts with denial, especially in India. If there is a problem, you will see people saying, no, there is not a problem. We do not see that a problem. Why are you saying it? So it starts with denial. The second stage is where we start acknowledging it. Okay, we think there is an issue. We think there is some challenge, but we don't know what is the extent of that challenge. We don't know how that is going to impact us. We have seen similar thing in case of climate change also. And the third stage is where you are saying, okay, now I've acknowledged, I've understood, there is a problem, it has to be addressed. Tell us what are the solutions, how do we take actions? So with that in mind, maybe I'll start with the first speaker, Shweta. Shweta, as part of Prayas Energy Group, I think you have conducted energy modeling for various states, where you have also looked at what is the potential and the value demand flexibility programs can create, looking at different sectors. So maybe for the benefit of everyone, if you can take one of those states as an example and share what kind of potential with sectors that you identified, and so that people can also understand that, okay, this is not something which we are talking in hypothetical numbers, but it's based on some rigorous modeling and analysis.
Yeah, to begin with, I'd like to really thank Mahesh and Pramod. They made a very, very good context setting, and the presentations were very good. I'm sure for many here, the entire space of DSM and demand flexibility that we're talking about may appear alien. But again, let me tell you, all of us have to be a part of this progress to really enable, I think, the points that Mahesh made, which is as we move towards high or more renewable energy dense systems, all of us have to participate in such processes to really enable that to happen. So on that note, I'd like to share some insights from the studies that we have been doing at Prayas. And I think I have been having bilateral conversations with some of the students here to explain what is it that we've been doing. I also know that there are a few students here who've been using the data that we have collected as a part of our surveys, even some that Mahesh just put up, to really understand how consumers use appliances, how what is the kind of ownership, etc. So we've been trying to do this assessment of what is the actual potential of demand-side management of demand or demand flexibility to say in a utility system. And essentially why is, I think like Pramod and also Mahesh rightly brought out, that we've been talking about demand-side management for quite some time now, over a decade. But we really have very handful sort of projects that utilities are driving demand-side management. And so we felt that there is a lack in really DISCOMs finding the potential or identifying what is the exact potential of demand-side management and why that investment needs to be made. So for the state of Gujarat, these are all modeling exercises, so please excuse me if I'm going to be using some numbers. These are all scenarios that we've been working with, and I'd like to just open this up to everybody that all of the models that we work at Prayas are open source, and everybody's open to use them, play with them, come up with their own scenarios. So for the state of Gujarat, interestingly, we've observed that by 2030, by introducing energy efficiency, demand-side management, and demand shifting, we can easily achieve about 11 to 15% savings in energy, in the total energy demand. And what this translates to is a tariff benefit of almost 40 paise in 2030, which is huge, right? So 2-3 takeaways here is or what I would like to share essentially is Gujarat is one state where we've done this exercise, but essentially demand side management will depend very much on the kind of consumers that you're talking to, the sectors that you're intervening in, and the kind of weather patterns that those particular states or areas have. So I think all of these need to be factored in when we talk about demand side management and demand flexibility. And of course, I think all of us here are vocal about it, is that utilities need to be the active participants in driving these mechanisms.
Thanks, Shweta. So when we were looking at the different policies, regulations, the action plans, there were a few things that appeared common in all of those documents. In terms of huge cases, as I was also earlier mentioning, the huge cases have gone beyond peak demand management. They're talking about how do we have like resource adequacy, how do we create margins in the system. They're talking about congestion management, whether it's at the transmission level or at the distribution level. How do we increase reliability of supply? Because when we talk about energy access is a function of both affordability as well as reliability. We also noticed that in terms of the market creation, these regulations are not only talking about, let's say, for the ancillary services, they're also talking about how it can become part of the wholesale market. In terms of levers, talking about tariff-based incentives, competitive bidding, direct load control, and also on the business models, how aggregators can play a role. So with that in mind, I'll go to the next panelist, Anurag. And Anurag had something interesting to share. As I was presenting that, we can learn a lot from the renewable sector. And Anurag from RE Connect, they have a AI platform. They are a qualified QCA service provider, also do the forecasting of renewable generation, perhaps of the demand as well. So all of those knowledge, something which we feel is also applied on the demand side. So Anurag, maybe for the benefit of the audience, if you can briefly explain how this model of aggregation and QCA works. And then with that background, how do you feel it can be applied to the demand flexibility market? Yeah.
Thank you, Pramod. Wonderful question. So I'd like to share how this, the concept has emerged and as far as the Indian context, in the Indian context. So basically, like Pramod said that, as you mentioned earlier, when we started in 2010, the share of the RE in the grid was around 15 gigawatt or so. At that point of time, for next 2-3 years, everyone saw that there were a lot of policy push, which created or enabled the market of developing more and more solar or wind, more and more renewables into the grid. And because of that, there were some problems which were envisaged as far as the grid operations is concerned. Because with a lot of RE, what happens with the RE is a lot of intermittency and variability comes into the grid. And if the grids are inflexible, it becomes very difficult to operate the grid at real-time basis. So these issues were deliberated at various forums for like initial 4-5 years post 2010. And based on that, then our policy regulators came up with this concept of having a aggregator model where, as far as the RE is concerned, these aggregators are known as qualified coordinated agencies, which basically aggregate the RE demand, basically the RE, and bundles it and then dispatch. And so yeah, I mean, after 2014, since more and more RE started flowing into the grid, and the QCA, the concept was floated by the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, and then it was also replicated by various SERCs, State Electricity Regulatory Commissions. And this not only enabled the distributed renewable energy resources, it enabled the visibility of the DRE, which was earlier absent. So though we had a 15 gigawatt of RE in 2010, but we hardly had any visibility that what kind of resources are there, at what time they are generating, and what kind of, and how much quantum they are injecting at what kind of, what point of time. So what used to happen was there's a lot of curtailment which used to happen. And because of that, generators used to face a lot of, the losses, and so do the grid operators. Because for the grid operators, it becomes a massive challenge to kind of, balance all this intermittent demand and variability in demand. So post 2014, when all these regulations emerged, and it took a couple of years for the regulations to mature and to be implemented by the state entities. And then after that, we saw, everyone saw that there's a lot of grid discipline which came into picture, which was non-existent earlier. Earlier, anyone who was generating was just dumping it to the grid because there was a policy of mass run for the RE. And because of that, again, there was huge losses for everyone, all the stakeholders on the supply side, on the system operation side. So there were a lot of learnings along the way for the last 4 or 5 years, because in the last 4 or 5 years, we have seen that suddenly there is a lot of push from the central as well as the state side to increase the RE capacity. Right now, we have around 120 to 125 gigawatt in 2023. And we are aiming at 500 gigawatt of renewables by 2030. So it's almost 3.5 times the total capacity. And with this capacity, we can see that, there is a lot of intermittency and variability which will come to the grid. So as far as the aggregators concept is concerned, so aggregator has been very beneficial to the overall grid operations and management. It has bundled all the distributed RE and provided a grid discipline which was lacking earlier. Similar concept, so this was the supply side story basically. So similar concept we can envisage on the demand side, because demand is again a very, it's not that much managed as it should be. That's what we believe. Currently, if you look at the demand, the Indian demand is around, in terms of BUs, it is 1,600 BUs and all. And by 2030, it is poised to be around 2,000 to 2,300 BUs. If you look at the demand, why I'm saying the aggregator is necessary, of course, the large proportion of this demand is basically comes from the CNI. CNI basically comes from over 50% of the total consumption. It's around 1,300 or so BUs. So there, what we can see that, if we can aggregate the supply side, similar learnings we can deploy on the demand side, and the target those sectors which are consuming more and more. Basically, the CNI would be the lowest hanging fruit. And of course, with the infusion of more resources or more, you can say that the other players in the grid, like the storage and the other EV vehicles and all. So there will be a lot of variability and intermittencies coming to the grid by the time we'll reach the 2030, the overall targets. So we see that a lot of, the similar aggregator model can be brought over there, and the learnings can be replicated, and it will lead to a creation of a well-fulfilled demand side market.
Yeah. Thank you, Anurag. Although you mentioned from an aggregation standpoint, commercial and industrial customers make sense. Not sure from how easy it would be to convince regulators and discoms, because they always see such customers as their cash cow. They feel that any DSM program, although Mahesh presented that there is still a value which can get created, but I think there is this traditional thinking that, okay, if we do that, we are going to, lose on the revenue, which perhaps is a notional thing because demand is increasing. So even if you save some electricity, there is a scope to sell it to others. So we'll keep it for maybe some other time. But one thing I want to ask Mahesh, so in case of renewable, the way QCAs flourished, started with a national level model regulation on scheduling and forecasting. So how renewables were introduced into the DSM mechanism, deviation settlement mechanism. It's a different DSM. And then very quickly, states adopted it, and then they have implemented it as well. When we look at the demand side management regulation, the model regulation coming in 2010, it took 10 years for the state to notify it. Almost every state have followed the same template. They've changed the name of the state, and that's what the state DSM regulation is. But we are yet to see implementation like full-fledged utility-led program where regulator has approved it. Of course, there are good examples from Maharashtra and few other states. But yeah, what do you think, Mahesh, are regions prohibiting the similar kind of uptake and acceleration?
Okay, so this takes me back to 2004, where in one of the southern states, the managing director of a particular utility was very happy if you could take away the agricultural load from them. And the point that is important to note here is that the distribution companies are mostly acquainted and very well acquainted with the supply side of things. They are in the business of selling electricity and getting revenues out of it. And here we are suddenly talking about a structure which we call as demand side management, where we want the utilities to go to the consumers and ask them to save electricity. It's an entirely sort of shift in thinking. So the unfortunate part being the utility engineers and utility managers, financials, etc., are not geared up to understand customer side of the meter. And so for them, it's all an aggregation of different feeders which contribute to the, which are predominantly residential consumers or municipal consumers. And for them, it's like my peak demand of this particular day was 20,000 megawatt. They don't really look at what contributed to that. Fortunately, with the new variable renewable energy sources and additional cheaper cost energy coming into the picture, that is changing. And Pramod, you very well articulated the kinds of policy enablers that we already have. And this include, one of the key things that I want to highlight here is the tertiary services in the ancillary services regulations of CERC, wherein we're actually now in the process of taking away the demand side management and demand response implementation opportunities from the state level to a wholesale markets level. So I think that's a very interesting sort of shift. And there are several aggregators who would come forward, and I just want to sort of create some kind of a parallel with PJM, which is one of the largest independent system operator in the US, that has a specific mechanism to enroll aggregators, certify them, train them. Even the aggregators staff need to go through a particular certification process. So I think we are getting there, and fortunately the tertiary services as a part of the ancillary services regulations would allow any kind of aggregation of 150 kilowatt. I think that was not there before, and now that is now sort of added up to 1 megawatt. So if you can aggregate 1 megawatt of load anywhere in the country, you can bid that into the wholesale power markets. So I think we have come a long way. And there was also a situation where chicken or the egg first. The utilities would say, who will install thermal energy storage systems? And the thermal energy storage system operators would say, I don't have any kind of clients who would benefit from aggressive time of day, time of use tariff set up by the regulators and implemented by the DISCOMs. So I'll pause here for now.
Yeah. Thanks, Mahesh, for sharing that. There is already a mechanism, tertiary ancillary services market, where one can aggregate demand resources, and it can participate through a bidding process. So I think some of the concerns which regulators and in general government have in place, how do we set a fair tariff? Are we doling out money from our public resources? So competitive bidding is the best way to discover that price. Thank you. So I'll move on to Sunil next. Sunil is from BYPL, everyone knows. And BYPL is a pioneer when it comes to implementing demand-side management programs, not just from an energy efficiency side, but in the last slide I had mentioned pilot projects in India, and a couple of the pilot projects on demand response has been implemented by BYPL. They're also doing very aggressive when it comes to rooftop solar and electric vehicle charging. So from the demand side, all the pieces, all the interventions that one had to do, BYPL is already doing it. So thank you, sir. Whenever we have to look for any resources, we look at private discoms, including BYPL. So the question, I have a couple of questions to you. Sorry, I'm bombarding you with questions. My first question is, with the recent policies, regulations that we see, which are increasingly talking about demand flexibility, has there been any change in the approach and the directions that you receive from regulator that now you have to start looking at it in a more aggressive manner? You have to start looking at it at scale. That's my first question. The second question, when we talk about the business models and intermediaries such as aggregators, how have you implemented your projects in the past? Was that all BYPL led, or you had some service providers to support you? And what is your plan going forward? When you do it at scale, pilot and scale, it's a different game altogether. Are you still thinking about there is a scope to involve intermediaries, aggregators, service providers?
Yeah, thank you, Pramod, for asking very relevant questions. So first of all, I'll just explain you the situation Discom like us is. So like BYPL is serving a very congested area. So there's a lot of very little scope for network augmentation. And we really have to think twice where to put up our substations and how to augment our lines. So we have been thinking about this demand response and other measures where we can mitigate our ever increasing peak demand. So this applies to many other city-centric utilities also. So that's why we tried out so many things. Let me just briefly tell you what sort of projects we have tried. We tried manual demand response twice, where we covered C&I customers for 2 consecutive years. Then we tried auto DR with one leading industry player. And also we tried out putting up microgrids, that is behind the meter energy storage. The report is in public domain. It is evaluated by CEW, where we wanted to see whether batteries, if they can be installed in residential places, can they help us in managing the demand if these systems are deployed at a very large scale levels. So we understand our limitations, and that's why we started thinking about these measures, and we wanted to explore demand response in a greater way. So yes, there is a lot of potential, and that was, established once that Prime Minister level event took place. So we could identify in residential sector there is close to 100 to 200 megawatts, which is already lying dormant. So yes, as a resource adequacy, Discoms have to think where the resources are in terms of demand side management. But at the same time, we have to really identify which segments we have to target, whether the customers would be easily enrolling onto those programs or not, what would be their response. So that needs to be seen, which pockets hold maximum demand response potential. So of course, much more detailed, in-depth studies need to be carried out. And yes, we want to explore this area further. That's why we partnered with Schneider Electric, and we are doing a lot of work. And see, from our past experience, we identified that yes, it's the demand response key driver for customers would be pure economics. Commercial and industrial customers, they want to save energy, and they just want to, if they reduce their load at certain times, in case they save their energy and there's certain incentives, yes, of course they want to participate. But as far as residential customers go, they are a bit wary of privacy. Nobody would want to go, be happy with monitoring of their consumption and so many devices and Discom controlling their loads. And say if I pay you 500 rupees per month, would you allow that? So high-end residential customers and C&I customers are one untapped segment. And I just want to answer the C&I sensitivity, why some of the Discoms are not touching it. But yes, why? Because Discom is a representative of all customers. In case cross-subsidy goes, then your residential customer tariff would be affected. So we have to strike a balance. So rather than looking at it as a profitability objective, we have to look at it as a tariff levelizing activity. So yes, we want to scale it up. There's a lot of potential, but which customers to target, which segment, where the potential is, and how to bring them to this proven, established concept, and to take out their sensitivities. So it has to be done in a very mature and methodical way. So that's why we are trying it out in one large-scale area in residential high-end segment. If the model is proven, then of course it can be replicated. Enabling regulations-wise, yes, people say yes, there are a lot of regulatory things are there, but implementation mechanisms have to really come out from state-level regulations. Your resource adequacy framework talks about it, but detailed guidelines need to be there. What sort of, say, in case central system operator is able to come out with a mechanism that Discoms, yes, if you reduce your load at such and such time, there can be back-to-back agreements through aggregators. And yes, Discoms can participate easily. So it has to be detailed out a bit more clearly so that Discoms can do it in a large-scale manner. For a Discom like us, EV is a key concern, EV load. It's going to come up hugely in the next 4 or 5 years. So we are targeting bus depots, how we can, control their loads. So we are in talks with bus depots. So, of course, so the problem starts with demand forecasting. So Discoms have to really modify their practices in terms of how they project their load forecasting. So it has to be net load forecasting. A lot of DERs are going to come in, a lot of variability in terms of EV charging. So say if I tell you that tomorrow I may need a demand flexibility of 10 megawatts and I'm not very sure of what my load is going to be because I don't have sophisticated softwares at my end to predict my demand. So these systems won't be of any use to me. So your demand forecasting has to really mature at Discom level. So these are some of the things, but private Discoms like us, we are already foreseeing this and we have taken steps in these directions. And we are ready to scale it up, but provided these proven solutions are there. Lot of potential is there in C&I segment in case people who have got BMS already there, they are already managing their load with respect to TOD tariffs are there. But in case there's an aggregator which can bring in 100, 200 C&I customers, on Discom signals, yes, these things can be done. But some more detailed guidelines need to be there at state level regulators.
Thank you. I think you have also given an idea to our participants, mainly students who are here, how to implement demand response programs for residential segment when there is a concern around, sensitivity of and privacy of data and the consumption pattern. So something you can think about how other countries have done it and how they have addressed this problem. And thank you also so much for sharing about this importance of an accurate demand forecasting, because that's how you're going to predict what you need to plan for. So that the perfect segue to Nandan, which from Schneider and who has suite of solutions. You think of anything around smart grid, Nandan would say, we have a product, we have a solution for that. So whether it's smart plugs, forecasting, building management solutions, and any other thing. So Nandan, my question is, I think in the
which will be able to provide right insights to the utilities to know the peak loads which are coming at what time, okay? That enables. And now we have gone even more further with the AMIs, which are advanced metering, where you can know even at a load level, individual load level, how is the consumption pattern, without even getting into the individual privacy factor, but you get a fair idea what kind of loads are peaking at what period of time, and that is a very, very valuable information which is available now at a utility disposal once the smart metering programs or this kind of a smart devices programs are deployed at scale. Deploying at scale is the key, because let's take an example of a residential where we have done one pilot, and you rightly mentioned BYPL is one of the progressive utilities when it comes to managing these kind of a pilots, where we are trying to work out with them a kind of a pilot on the residential side, where we wanted to understand, like you and me at home, okay, how are our loads are there, and when we intervene at an individual load level, what kind of fear we have. Like Sunil mentioned, whether there is a privacy factor which people get disturbed into. If I switch off your AC for 10 minutes, will you be okay with that to manage the peak load? So we wanted to do a pilot to understand this kind of behavioral or very direct intervention, how the people are going to react. Are they okay with that? And also the obvious results which is going to come out of it. Saying even if we are able to intervene for 10 minutes, and when we extrapolate it to certain kind of residences, it is coming to more than 70-75 megawatt saving. It's massive, okay? But we wanted to understand behavioral part of it, and we have done this pilot, and as we are speaking, it's ongoing. We are about to finish that pilot soon. But the point is, what has come out, very, very nice results. Little early tidbits from that is, consumers are open for this. It was consent-based. Consumers are more educated, and of course, this is the kind of consumers, maybe little educated ones, who are more willing to participate in this kind of programs. So far, they have been very positive in terms of responding to this kind of specific interventions for 10 minutes at a different point of time, where we are going to intervene for a specific devices. Today, we have done it for something like refrigerators, which they don't even realize that 10-minute intervention has happened for them. So tomorrow, it can be EV. It can be any device where we can have a very specific intervention for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Time slots can be anything. Why I'm mentioning this time slots is it gives a lot of demand flexibility programs to be deployed. It need not be only peak load management. It is about flexibility to the utilities, which they can use this to manage their entire grid systems and other stuff. So the pilots, what we are doing, are very interesting insights. It is coming out. It gives us 2-3 main points. One, data should be reliable and should be available at the right time for the utilities, first. Second, it should be as granular as possible. You are going to the device level. If it is available, that becomes even more interesting for the utilities, and should be controllable. One is to know, second is to control that. Second, it should be controllable, of course, with the user consent-based, or it can be some incentive-based. It can be either way. So this is something which is coming out as a very strong points for us. And to the second point, what you said, we have these technologies, we have this kind of systems in place which can be deployed at scale. Where are we struggling? Okay, we are struggling in one major piece. Who is going to invest? Because here it's a trinity of success. Huh? It's utilities, it is government policies, and somewhere the regulatories and Bureau of Energy Efficiency who needs to give the guidelines. Today, utilities are willing to, but they are somewhere crippled in terms of the capex investments, or in terms of who is going to compensate for this. They are in that mindset, and then when we go to the regulators, it becomes a little longer process in terms of proving this, and we are circling around. I think as a system, if we are able to come out with little more aggressive, little more progressive way to faster deploy this kind of pilots in larger scale, and then maybe make it as a regulation, make it as a process, that helps. I think the technology is no more a barrier. I think people, at least it may be a smaller pilot, but at least what we have seen, people are more open for this kind of a stuff, because it's more helping towards making India green. So I don't see people as that. Of course, we need to spend a lot on the education, awareness, and other stuff, but that is given. Then, of course, utilities are willing. But I think somewhere all of us need to sit together and come out with a kind of a structure which enables this to deploy. Technology is no more a concern or a constraint.
Thank you. I have a small follow-up in the pilot that you, along with BYPL, you are doing for residential. Were there any expectations from the customers with respect to, incentives or any other thing that will generate their interest in this program?
Yes, I think when we asked consumers what made you really going to sign up for this, I think, of course, a lot of them mentioned, are you going to, how much is the bill reduction you're going to give us? It's a very simple, straightforward question, and I think you and me will ask the same. If you are going to intervene on my home, what are you giving back? It's simple. And of course, it may be, if you are talking of having a intervention for 10 minutes, you're talking of only 0.1 units. It's not that it can excite consumers, but at the same time, to onboard lot many people, I think this is where we need to see as a framework, as a regulatory framework, how we can incentivize them better. This definitely is a catch. And second, very good point, which came out more voluntarily, was around the green side of it. People wanted to contribute towards this because they said this is more sustainable. This will help in terms of managing the grids better and overall management in terms of sustainability. So these were the two main drivers which we found out during the interviews with the current consumers. Yes, I think incentivization is the key, I would say, and then followed by the education around the sustainability and other stuff.
Yeah. So I know, Mahesh, you want to come in. Just, I think one thing, I think with the solution in place, it definitely helps in a better monitoring of the savings achieved and what value it will create. So the way you were explaining about metering at the facility or household level, and then metering at the maybe DT level, distribution transformer, or at a substation level, one can relate how the participation of customers and their contribution are helping the DISCOM to save money, whatever that situation is, whether at that time they are buying expensive power or they are struggling to meet the demand because already the system is stressed. So that value, once it gets properly demonstrated and converted into monetary figures, perhaps the customers will also start reaping the benefit, because it won't be just 1 kilowatt hour or 0.1 kilowatt hour. It's also the capacity value that will get saved, and perhaps with regulatory intervention that can be passed on. So yeah, Mahesh, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, no, actually, as a co-conspirator with Pramod, I just want to bring in Shweta here and help us do a bit more of willing suspension of disbelief in demand flexibility, demand side management. I want to understand, Shweta, there have been some time of day tariff studies that have happened in India, but we do not really see very aggressive TOD structures, the way you would see it in, say, Europe, US, Singapore, and so on. So what are your thoughts on how can we really make the TOD setting very robust? That's one question. And the second question is, do you see any role of the RE and the RTC bits to also include demand flexibility as one component, similar to we using, say, storage as a solution? So if you could highlight that.
Yeah, thanks, Mahesh. Nandan just talked about all of the technology and the data that we require to really implement demand flexibility, and I would say in a much better sense. But given what we are dealing with today, we still have a long way to get there. Without, let's say, that granular data, is there a mechanism or a way by which we can really move towards better management of load or implement some mechanisms, one being time of day and time of use tariffs? So like Mahesh rightly said, yes, time of day and time of use tariffs have been in place for quite some time in several utilities. And also, like Pramod mentioned in the introductory presentation, that the consumer rules have made it mandatory now, starting 1st of April 2024. There'll be an excess of 20% charge that will be levied on commercial and industrial consumers in the non-solar hours, and there'll be a 20% rebate on tariff during the solar hours. So you see the kind of dialogue that we are moving towards in terms of TOD, TOU is to really help in this more renewable energy penetration and support that we start using more power during the time when we have renewable energy. So there, this is also coming from some of the exercises that we have done, is also as a part of the study in Gujarat, what we see is the load curve or the load shapes are very, very typical of who is consuming electricity and at what times of the day and what season it is, right? So all of these three are very critical and crucial to understand in order to prevent RE curtailments and to prevent peak shortages, right? So through the scenarios that we've been working with, we see that bringing in energy efficiency into, let's say, even residential or industrial sectors can elevate a lot of these problems. So identifying first, as a first resort, introducing energy efficiency at several sectoral levels can bring down the need for curtailing RE as well as reducing your peak. Once that happens, then identifying the peaks when we are purchasing high cost market power is telling us the time slots when TOD and TOU can be implemented. I mean, right now, we are in a, I would say in a era where we have these flat sort of implementations for TOD, TOU, which is dependent on your connected load or your demand. But making it more finer and granular will help. I think just yesterday I was discussing this with Sangeeta, that Kerala has a very, very typical load curve. And they have very high consumption from residential sector. And the classic, so if you look at any SLDC curve from Kerala, you will see 2 evening peaks. So the first evening peak comes when the lighting and the ceiling fan load comes in, and the second peak comes when air conditioners kick in. But their TOD tariff structures currently are dealing only with the first peak. Now you have to work around better TOD structures to ensure that the LDC should be able to manage the 2 peaks that come in the evening. So these are some complications that are happening, and for these, even without granular data, I think the utilities with better load management and load forecasting, I would say, should be able to come up with these better TOD structures and designs, and also include many more consumers into this regime, rather than fixing it at some larger capacities. One other small thing that I would like to bring in here is, I think Sunil ji was talking about the resource adequacy framework, or utilities being able to better project their demand. So we have been looking at some of these load forecasting results that a few of these DISCOMs have come up with based on the resource adequacy framework. And it is really appalling to say that most DISCOMs are still relying on very standard techniques like CAGRs or linear growth rates or trend analysis to really predict what the demand will be. So I think Nandan and people like Nandan who can really contribute to bettering this forecast, even with even electricity sales data. So how is it that residential demand is going to be different than your agricultural demand? Everything can't be at a CAGR of 5 and 6 and 7%, right? So I think all of this also plays into how your tariff structures will evolve.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions before we open the floor to the audience. So one question, sorry Sunil ji, there's a lot that we would like to know from you. So whenever we go to states and DISCOMs, we hear 2 things. So one thing, and I see Dhruvak in the room, he has recently talked to many DISCOMs regulators on this. When we go to regulators saying, okay, these regulations are in place, why are you not asking your DISCOMs to come up with large-scale demand flexibility program? They say, okay, we are waiting, we are here. If they come up with a proposal, we are going to evaluate it and we are going to approve it. When we go to DISCOMs, why are not doing it? We are waiting for the regulators to tell us that what we need to do, and then we'll start, and come with the program. That's a reality perhaps many of us working in this domain have faced. So my question to you is, after those pilots and have the results, I know Nandan mentioned that the recent pilot of interruptible load is still sort of being implemented, results will come out, we'll wait for that. But for the prior programs, after those pilots were completed, have you gone back to the regulator saying these are the evidence This is how the system is benefiting. If we structure a program, whether through tariff or through incentives, perhaps it's in the win-win interest of both DISCOMs, customers, as well as society at large. Has that happened in case of Delhi?
First of all, I'll just explain how the regulator and how proposals are put up. In case you go to a regulator, it has to be a definite proposal, and it should be definite that if you are going to do this, this is going to happen, then the regulator deliberates on it. Then the regulator obviously deliberates and further gives further guidance. Now in case of DR, say you want to do it in residential segment, okay? So if I tell you 100 megawatt is there, so where is it? Can you find out easily? You tell me where would you go? So a lot of surveys have to be carried out. A lot of customer willingness and customer behavior has to be studied. So the project has to be conceptualized in that manner. And one large scale project, I think we have not done it, but our sister concern has done it, that behavioral program with O-Power, which is hugely successful. So it depends on the merit and implementability of such projects. Then of course, when the proposal is in the right shape, then it is obviously put up to the regulator. Now vis-a-vis DR, yes, I'm of the opinion that for C&I, yes, there is a lot of potential. And these things can be done so easily. But what should be the incentivization mechanism? It has to come out. How M&V has to be carried out? How would you evaluate what would be the DISCOM streams of benefits? Whether it would be APPC savings, capex deferral, a lot of things are going to come in. You are going to calculate peak saving based on historical data. But going forward, that may not be the true case. Now exchanges are offering peak power at a cheaper rate. Going forward, there's a lot of restructuring going on. That may not be the scenario. There would be a lot of pooling, and DISCOMs may be at some freedom to go for peak power purchase. So it has to be conceptualized very judiciously. So high-end residential, so model has to be established. So high-end residential, one society we are trying out. So we have to come out and with a figure that yes, 1 rupee or 2 rupee, if the customer would be able to save. Now say you save 500 units in 1 month. So with 500 rupees, if I give you, would you allow us to start monitoring your home consumption? As a utility, I'll come to know that you are not there in your residence, what you're doing. There are a lot of analytics algorithms can be applied. So data privacy issues are there. So all these things, once they come out, then of course, once we feel confident, then these proposals can be put up. C&I can be done, yes, but of course we'll need an aggregator. A lot of communication and channels need to be set up. M&V mechanism has to be detailed out. Whether regulator would agree for that M&V mechanism or not, that is a question. So, say to propel RE, there are clear, detailed regulations and guidelines in case of Delhi. We have GNM, we have VNM, we have detailed guidelines. So why not detailed things for these things also? That will clear, that would be a good advice to DISCOM how to implement these programs and what sort of projects can be coming out. So the key factor is where is the potential? So a directive should come from regulators. DISCOMs should identify and through a detailed study which involves a lot of surveys and consumer behavior assessments. So it's not so easy to implement DR in our context. That is my point.
No, I agree.
But yes, a lot of potential is there. It can be done.
Yeah, no, I agree, and we have been part of a few load research surveys and exercise, and we could know how intensive it is, the kind of resources required. And even regulators have to, support the availability of those resources. Of course, BEE is doing its part, but yeah, definitely. So one last question.
Tariffs, I believe, is the ultimate mechanism to, manage all this.
Yeah.
So if some more flexibility is allowed in determining tariffs, that would be always helpful.
So one, again, looking at the topic, creating a market, and in case of energy efficiency, everyone would have heard about ESCOs, energy service companies, and how they come in, they take care of the initial investment. So it's like a sharing of risk, or the owner doesn't have to do that investment. And of the value that they create, the savings they create, they take care of their investment, plus customer also gets benefited. So it's a good model, and perhaps something similar can be thought of on the demand response, on demand flexibility part, like service providers or aggregators coming into picture and committing that, okay, I take the responsibility of acquiring all the distributed resources. It's my responsibility to go out to different customers, take care whether they want to subscribe to this program or not, and I'll apply my own probability factor. But whenever you need the resources with whatever products you are designing, whether you need demand flexibility 15 minutes in advance or maybe 1 hour later, so then accordingly there could be a structured arrangement where revenue or benefits can be given to the service provider. So my question to Anurag and Nandan, given that ESCOs are often like from the service provider side, from the solution provider side, what do you see? Like, are there any challenges, or will you be open for this kind of a model where your revenues are going to be dependent on the contribution that you bring?
So yeah, I think this kind of a model, again, it's not new. Okay, perhaps on the demand side of it, perhaps it is becoming little newer, at least in India. But we have in certain other geographies and other countries where this is a very common model. If you go to Australia, it's become from at least a decade, this kind of a model exists. Japan, it's there for a very long time, where you are able to have this kind of a models. And this is something which is definitely one possibility which gives a comfort, but I think again this requires certain assurance on the investment you make, because I think you are making a substantial investment, because whenever we are talking of this kind of implementation, it's a scale, okay? And that's a massive investment. Unless you are assured of getting a returns, which is the key factor, nobody will come forward and invest such big money. So for that, there has to be kind of a regulatory framework which should back the proposals, saying that, okay, this is the joint collaboration with utilities backed by certain regulator, which will assure you the return back of your investment. Perhaps the duration can vary from a shorter duration to a little longer duration when it comes to this, but at least if there is a kind of a framework, a policy framework, which assures this kind of a return, I think we will see a lot of players who will be coming up with this kind of a technology and this kind of a business model implementation, which can be a interesting way. And Schneider, for example, has done this kind of a model in US, where we are already doing this kind of a stuff. But again, in India, I think it is definitely potential is there. Technologies are available and utilities are willing. I think it's more of a one step ahead now. We need to start going from beyond pilot and going to the implementation, taking that one extra step from everyone. It's not just from utilities or from the industry, but also from the regulator to come out beyond the traditional thinking and trying out little larger scale. And that's something which is needed. I think otherwise we will be doing pilots and pilots and pilots. We have done enough pilots. I think as an industry, we have enough reports across where we have very good results, but perhaps what next is the missing.
Thank you. Perhaps a model with some, upfront fixed fee, little bit of success fee to begin with, and then, changing that. Anurag, very quick, from your side.
I guess Nandan has covered all the points very well. Technology is not a barrier. The regulatory and the policy framework, which can create a proper incentive mechanism for all the stakeholders, is what we require. It's not only about the entity which is like reducing the demand, or the entity which is on the other side of it getting benefited. It has to be all the stakeholders, and until and unless that kind of incentive mechanism is properly designed and backed up by regulatory and policy development, the market is not going to flourish. So yeah, we see a lot of players entering into this market once this kind of frameworks.
Oh, great. I think I can see we are clearing the second barrier of acknowledgement, now we are talking about action, so that's a good thing. With this, we have some time for audience questions. If you can briefly, say your name, organization, and then which panelist you would like to answer your question.
Hi, I'm Prashant Vasai, I'm a bit sport for choice. I'll target this Shweta maybe. You can tell from my accent I'm from UK. I think about 2/3 of homes there have smart meters now. As far as I'm aware, only about 1 or 2 of the suppliers have actually offered smart tariffs. It's been a resounding failure, and I've been involved in this for about 15 years, where it's gone through this initial optimism, a belief that something like 10-15% of domestic loads is shiftable. I think Shweta was right that the emphasis should be on energy efficiency in the homes. There's an awful lot some utilities have done. In Sacramento, one called SMUD used to pay customers to paint their roofs white. There are many, many interventions that utilities can make to reduce demand. But the real opportunity, and I'm surprised nobody's mentioned this, is from the whole vehicle-to-grid movement, which rather it kind of obviates the need for smart tariffs or anything, because you can directly use the vehicle software to transfer power back and forth to the grid. Now, in India, very soon we're going to have gigawatts of batteries attached to the grid. Why are we not talking about that and forgetting about demand flexibility at the household level?
I mean, as an idea, I completely agree, and we need to look at households as that resource for demand flexibility. But you have to, I think in the Indian context, out of 250 million, we might have a share of about 10 million who can contribute to this. That doesn't say we shouldn't try, but as I see it, it will remain again at probably the pilot levels. Something that I think Mahesh and me, we were discussing over dinner yesterday was these projects, let's say that EESL is coming up for Lodha, where you have a huge settlement with, let's say, 300 households having air conditioners. Can those kind of settlements start becoming this resource for demand flexibility? In terms of storage, I'm sorry, but I don't think I will be able to answer that very rightly in a short frame. Maybe we could discuss post this.
Anyone? Yes, Professor.
Thank you, panelists, for a wonderful panel discussion. I'm Asad Sai from the Indian Institute of Technology, Roper. One question which I have is that are you satisfied with the kind of skill development which has happened during the inception phase from 2014 to 2023? And given the fact that there are aims and ambitions that we would be able to install 40 gigawatt of renewable energy per year, and any thoughts on how educators, people who are working on training and skilling should look into the next 10 years? Thank you.
Anyone in the panel like to?
I think MNRE has got a lot of skill programs. So industry has already taken the lead, and a lot of skilled manpower is there. In terms of DISCOMs, now DISCOMs are acting as nodal agencies for implementing RE, distributed RE. So MNRE is supporting them through various specific training programs, as well as guidance, as well as incentives to really bring their manpower and set up required systems and practices. So a lot of improvements have taken place. So
Skill Council for Green Jobs.
They're giving
been running
certifications.
massive programs on capacity building. But RE, sorry, it's slightly out of topic. Maybe we can discuss it later. Any question that's pertinent to the topic? Kindly be brief in your question.
Hi, this is Madhav, a PhD student from IIT Kanpur. As the introduction of TOU, Shweta ma'am and the initial presentation also was discussed. So I was just wondering about the current ACOS for billing is done by normal, calculating the average revenue requirement, because the blocks are not differentiated. So when we have a time of day tariff, or how would that process be done? A little bit light on that, sir. If it's right question.
I think you can. I'm not a regulatory.
No, I just wanted to sort of highlight some kind of a staggering opportunity. So you have time of day tariff, right? And just picking up on what Shweta was mentioning earlier, say a large community of say 300 apartments and dwelling units, it's a good opportunity to do some kind of a staggering of the load. Okay, so I completely agree. Unless you have a thermal energy storage, you can't really shift the air conditioning load, but you can probably do some pre-cooling, right? But you can also, for a period of that call, say 30 minutes, 10 minutes, you can also increase the temperature. So it's also a lot of behavioral science that needs to be applied there. So there is no one single solution. We need to try several opportunities on the demand side.
Thank you. And yes, maybe, yeah, last question for this session.
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief, but I was just curious that, you know, data is a huge need in the domain and the survey is very important. Where do you think the data disclosure would fit in something like this, which I think would be essential if we really want to scale it up at a certain level?
Yeah, no, so we have struggled a lot on data part, to be honest. And I always say, whichever programs, project that we are doing, at least keeping, you know, all the confidentiality and other clause that we have signed with our funders or with our client, let's try and make that data public. Even if we make it anonymous, that's going to be a very good news. Recently, we have completed survey of 600 plus hospitals in India. Entire data is made public, anonymized.
Yeah, no, so maybe I'll rephrase that question, is that several countries have a data disclosure procedure, maybe the, you know, the DISCOMs and the policymakers can look into that, because without that, the researchers, the you know, people who are working will not. So I thought that was something that is important to pass on as a community, that we need to work with the policymakers and DISCOMs to develop a mechanism for data. So it's not about survey, it's about actually having a mechanism.
Guidelines to us are very clear. We have to protect customer privacy. DISCOMs have a duty for that. So any neutral data can be shared, and with an NDA, any agency wants to work with us, we do it.
Yeah, I think on the building side, we are working with a few states. How do we bring this mechanism of, you know, mandatory data disclosure, especially if that can be linked to incentives or some kind of a market program. But yeah, thank you very much. And with this, okay, Sudha.
Thank you. I'm Sudha Sethi. I just wanted to ask, of all the DISCOMs in India, how many do you think have tried a pilot? We've talked about saying there are enough pilots. My wanting to understand this is to understand, have the DISCOM share their experiences with the others, because it's easier to learn from peers. So,
yeah, I think no less than 10 DISCOMs have tried, and that's been a combination of mostly private DISCOMs and the joint ventures. And the DISCOMs talk to each other. They also talk to their competitors. I've seen Rajasthan DISCOMs talking to Maharashtra, Karnataka, Uttar Pradesh, and so on. So they are in constant dialogue because they have similar problems to deal with. The unfortunate part is we have no more than 150 megawatt of demand side management that has been captured so far, which is like a fraction of what the potential is, right? That's the number. But they do talk, and there have been efforts where even AAA has been involved in something called as demand side management CEO forum, so to sort of bring all of them together. But I agree, Sudha, we need more and more dissemination and for them to exchange notes.
Yeah. A couple of those programs are actually large scale in nature. So yeah, back to you, Kashish.